What's up, guys? This is Heis, and welcome back to Stories from the Shop. We were running the Polar Express just earlier this week, and I got reminded of a story from my time at the BNSF Railway. It wasn't long enough to make one of these Stories from the Shop episodes, but it's of a general theme. Trains hitting stuff. It happens too often, generally. It's quite sad and frustrating. It's not like that they're going to come out of their way. Although some of them were operator error and were things that happened in yards. And yeah, so I've got a collection of things and stories of trains that crashed into stuff. And I have a lot of fun pictures of some of the ones that we had to take a look at the shop otherwise. So let's get started. So we'll start with one that was a locomotive that came into the shop early in my time there. I was still shadowing other supervisors. I didn't really know what was going on. I was fresh out of college. I knew nothing but thought I knew everything and was generally a pain in everyone's butt. I don't know how that's changed, but here we are. More time, I guess. We get reported this locomotive that comes to the service track for mechanical inspection. Anytime locomotives hit things that would involve legal action, so not our own BNSF stuff, if we hit people or animals or other cars or whatever, a mechanical fitness test of the locomotive had to be done. We'd have to either bring it to the shop or send folks to go inspect the locomotive on site to ensure that all of the warning devices and the brakes worked properly. So they'd have to do an air test, they'd have to test the horn, the bell, the lights, the wipers, the whole 9 yards. Anything that says, hey, get out of the way, and also helps the train not run into something, mechanical personnel had to certify. And then, in the case of something that would damage the locomotive, we would then have to check and make sure that no defects had come up, no air leaks, no bent things that would cause a safety hazard, that kind of thing. So this particular locomotive comes in, and it had a defect on it saying it needed to be sent to the shop because it hit a herd of cows that were in a cut. So we hear about it, and I was, the bright, bushy-eyed, bushy-tailed, whatever the saying is, trainee, following around one of the other senior supervisors. It's my friend Colt, and Colt just goes, "Hey, Mark, let's go take a look at this. It ought to be fun to look at." And I'm like, "But it hit a herd of cows." "Oh, okay, sure. I guess this is part of the job. We'll go look at it." This is like literally my first or second week on the job, not knowing anything. So we go down to the service track, and there's this big GE diesel locomotive. I don't remember the road number, and I don't have a picture, but I wish I did, because I was mentally preparing myself. It hit a herd of cows. Like, there's gonna be some bits, like it's gonna be gory or gross or icky or something. And we're walking up to it, and you can see that it is just absolutely covered in grass. And like nothing else. There's no blood, there's no guts or gore or any of that. You can see where the window wipers had scraped things away on the windshields, but the whole thing, I'm like, you couldn't even see the BNSF logo. And I'm like sitting here being like, it's just covered in grass. And Colt just turns to me and goes, "Yeah, what do cows eat?" And I went, "Oh, that's the inside of the 4 stomachs worth times however many is in a herd of cows." Oh, got it. So less gruesome than I expected, but shockingly on the backside. So that was a funny one. Another locomotive comes to us with a defect, and it specifically needs to go to the shop, hit a deer or an elk or something. I think it was an elk, though we're not at the high enough elevation in Seattle for those. The locomotive comes to the shop, has the defect. I tell the laborers, like, "Hey, check this thing out. It's going to need to go through the wash rack and get cleaned up. Like, let me know if there's anything more that we run into." And this is like a couple more weeks in the job. I'm kind of used to things at this point, and I was running the show solo night shift, probably like my first or second month. And my laborer calls me on the radio, and he goes, "Hey, Mark." I go, "Yeah." And he goes, "Can I call you on the cell phone?" And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I answered the cell phone, and he just goes, "So what do you want me to do with the carcass?" Just like that. And I was like, what? It's like, "Yeah, the carcass, it's still here on the engine. It was on the, on the front." I'm like, I don't know. This was not in my handbook. They did not prepare you for this at corporate land. What do when train hit animal? What do with animal? theoretically, I'm sure it actually should have been handled as some variety of biohazard in terms of corporate things, but I don't honestly remember what happened, but the laborers dealt with it. I bet it probably just went straight in the trash, which is probably not great, but I think that's probably what happened. More fun than, unfortunately, locomotives running into living things, which there were many more, and some of them are sad, and I don't want to get into for the sake of a short YouTube video. Locomotives hitting cars and other locomotives always made for some interesting things to stare at. So let's take a look at a few, shall we? So here you can see we have a coupler that has been wrapped in caution tape. What did this hit? Why is the coupler wrapped in caution tape? Well, the simple answer is it hit something that didn't really want to move, and it hit it really hard, because the coupler looks fine and the end sheet looks all fine, but what's behind that should look like this. Your draft gear and the way it pins in and the way it ties into the frame. And what it actually looked like behind that on that locomotive was like that. That is some, I think, 3/4 inch steel that has been totally split all the way up. So this locomotive was in yard service for a long time, so I think it did a little bit of the cyclic fatigue stress, in, out, in, out, in, out, bang, 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 hard couples over and over and over again. And this specific locomotive, 2810, remember the road number, I don't know why, had this happen twice, once on each end separately. Just one of those fun ones. Hi. Editor Heiss here. I should note, for the pictures we're about to see in these incidents, there were no humans hurt and there were no lives lost. Unfortunately, those sorts of things did happen at my time, and I did have to be involved with those, but that doesn't make for a happy story time for anyone, and this allows us to kind of separate some mechanical fun, interesting, see what happened to the choo-choo from some of the reality of some of these things that do happen. Now here is one of our Cascade Green older EMD locomotives, some variety of Jeep, that hit a car, and you can see the plow's a little bent on this side right here, and then on the other side, oh, it actually pinned in the end sheet right here. That end sheet is also probably 1/2 inch steel and quite long and supported by the plow and pretty well braced, and it bent it in probably a good 6 inches down here at the bottom, bent the steps. Those steps are now no longer usable for the train crew, so it came to the shop for us to fix that sort of thing. The car was totaled completely. I don't know if there was any other thing associated with the wreck, but choo-choo came and had to get fixed. We had to straighten the handrails, put new steps on it, the whole 9 yards. Here we have another train versus car kind of situation. This is a bigger locomotive. I believe this is a -9, probably by the road number. Shrug. This thing looks pretty fine from the front. Another train versus car. Don't play games at the gates. The train will beat you and it will destroy whatever you are. Don't be dumb around railroad crossings. But here you can see it must have clipped something. Again, bending the end sheet, totally collapsing the lower steps there, making quite the mess, and then bending the actual support for the step on the inside and the handrails, making this locomotive totally non-complying, and all of that wreck damage had to be straightened out. So, totally broke all that junk there. And what was interesting is that the car must have dragged for a bit. This is the other side that looked relatively okay. You could see that the sheets did some amount of warping because that step has gone kind of crazy there. Not too much damage on the front, but a lot of scraping along the trucks here. You can see all of this stuff and then onto the brake cylinder, and we had to note that there was a pretty bad air leak coming from this pipe here where the connection had been altered slightly by the addition of a motor vehicle. You can also see that the sander brackets and sander hoses got shoved right up into the truck, which is far from ideal. Again, that was that other side. And I had to take a picture of this because this always happened. We'd end up with war bonnet -9s with the air conditioners having been replaced. This is where the AC actually is for heating and cooling on a -9. And GE would just swap them out and give the fixed new ones to whichever railroad, so you end up with all kinds of variants there. And it always bugged me. You'd see a beautiful, pristine looking war bonnet maybe even in the 20-teens, and it would have an orange air conditioner. And this was the one I saw at the shop that had the pumpkin scheme, and then it had a war bonnet air conditioner. I was just like, can we swap them? Come on. And now for this one. This is the only one that I have a picture of what actually happened to it. And I remember seeing this picture going, oh, because the locomotive actually showed up to the shop before we got the picture. And I saw the picture later and it was like, oh, someone sent it to me and went, hey, look at this. Had a little oopsie. I don't know if the train was parked in the foul or if the locomotive was parked in the foul. It is a remote control locomotive, and then the cut came into it, but it lifted it up off of its wheels and was pretty nasty. This was one of our SW, is it 1200 or a 1500? The 3400 series was one, the 3600 series was the other. I think this is an SW 1200, because I think the 3600s were a little bit more powerful. Shrug. I'm probably misremembering. Somebody will remember better than me, or we'll look it up in the comments down below. But this was up in Everett, Washington, and then they shipped us the unit to get looked at because a little bit of an oopsie there. Yeah. And it made quite the mess, I'll tell you. Here it is at the service track arriving in. And yeah, had to take a look at it and get some pictures, see what was up. Put a nice big gouge in the fuel tank there. I mean, ridiculous. So the process for this one, in order to move it down, because this was unsafe to anyone who might come in contact with it before we got to it, it had to be prepared to move, as most of these sorts of situations had to, by some rapid responder or mobile machinist type person who would go out to the location and then make sure it was safe to move and note any non-complying things. And if there were issues that didn't comply, like as we'll see later in this one, a brake cylinder that was ripped off, so the brakes weren't all entirely operational, you had to get a special permit from the FRA to tow it dead. And they were usually really good about doing that as long as it was done in the safe way. You could see that we had to put this expansive kind of foam on it because it was just a jagged edge that had been peeled open by a hopper car. So far from ideal. And then the main reservoir got creased, and the retention tank, which we all called slangly the diaper tank, because any overflow of engine oil inside the engine bay would go down into that, was all looking kind of the way it was. But you can also see that the brake lever had been messed with, and the frame had been scraped down. This poor choo-choo got battered by this. I actually don't think... There's the broken brake cylinder and all the bits inside the fuel tank for easy transport. I actually don't think this unit came back into service after this wreck. If it did, it didn't come back to us in the Northwest. It was the last time we saw it, but at the same time we were trying to get rid of the 3400 series up there because the crews just... they would just kill the wheels on them. They were not powerful enough to really do what the railroad needed at that time, and they had special parts, and they were going away, and they were causing problems for everybody, and so they just got replaced with Jeeps, which historically, looking back on it, you know, in a preservation sense, it's kind of a bummer, but in the operation sense, I understood why. So you understand why the railroad modernizes, but it was a bit of a nasty one. And let's see, did he replace that brake cylinder? That might have been what it was that I had to denote. The brake cylinder got ripped off, and our mobile machinist might have had to actually go put that new brake cylinder on, which is why the paint doesn't match whatsoever. That might have been it. I don't remember. This was a long time ago now. And you can see even the end sheet was a little messed up, and the steps and everything. Just a bad day for a choo-choo. So that was probably about the worst wreck locomotive I saw at the shop while I worked there. Anytime they came in, they were always fun to photograph, and most of them looked about the same when it was a train versus car, just not doing much. But always interesting to see some really, really heavy, thick steel just bent like it's nothing. I mean, just incredible the forces behind some of this stuff. So, before we close out on the video, I mean, the big thing is be smart around trains. Be smart around crossings. Crossings sometimes can be unavoidable in design, and that's an entirely another frustrating topic. And I want to say the statistic is like once every 90 minutes, somebody gets hit by a train, whether they're in a car or just as a pedestrian in the USA. Once every 90 minutes. It's a train. It can't steer. It's not going to come get you. Don't pass the gates. Look both ways. I mean, be smart around those things. they're simple to avoid. And if you know someone that is having mental health type struggles, encourage them to get help, because there were a couple stories that I didn't want to share that we had that were a little bit more on the gruesome side, and including a couple suicides that I had to send guys to, and it's like, ooh, those were not fun days in the shop, and you never want to be a person involved in any of that sort of thing. So make sure that you're looking out for your friends and the folks around you who are important in your life. So be smart. Look around and help your friends and help your family and make sure everyone's doing well, because goodness, you want to make sure that sort of thing doesn't happen. So most of the time, amusing to see what happened after the fact and deal with it as a shop, of course, but it is an invariable reality that trains will run into other things, and it was always an interesting time at the shop. So I hope you liked this one. I hope you liked seeing some of the pictures. Anyways, guys, as always, thank you so much for watching. Catch y'all next time.